again, this video is about education for becoming. And I think it's important that each time I give you a little explanation, because this term is a little bit unusual, education for becoming, because it points to not just the typical education, math, reading, social studies, whatever that may be, but underneath it is teaching children how to lead a life that is always aiming at something richer, something fuller, becoming more of who we can become. It's a growth pattern that includes all the traditional subjects, but more than that, it's creating a certain outlook on life to grow. And that growth is generally in two directions. It's related to my personal achievement based on my abilities, talents, even environmental settings, but it's something that I can become more of or succeed and have achievement. And the other category is in growth toward helping, serving, having good relationships with other people, becoming a benefit to the people or the groups that I'm involved with. And that is a lifelong process. Hence, education for becoming. We take care of the core, math, reading, social studies, but at the same time, instilling these sorts of habits and these attitudes toward life. And this is not new. We didn't make this up. If you trace, recently I did a little bit of more research and trace the history in Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, across the board, this thought is there. That's the reason of education, is to become. And if you say, well, I'm not religious, well, the secular and secular philosophy have said the same thing. Whether you read Carl Jung or Soren Kierkegaard, the same kind of thought. Human beings have a natural instinct to grow and to thrive and become who they can become. And then, of course, the scientists of the 20th and 21st century have corroborated the same thing. The pinnacle of human evolution is that of being able to set goals, set high goals. So this thought about education for becoming is consistent through history and through science. Yet, all the traditions will tell you that in order to reach goals, in order to find purpose in life, begins with setting goals when you're young and having the habit of setting goals and achieving those goals. You need cognitive development or executive functioning, either one. And what that means is, number one, there's a constant setting of goals. Athletically, academically, intellectually, character-wise, you're always setting goals. That's a part of being a human being in a productive sense. Yet, at the same time, we have very, very natural and normal proclivities. Pleasure. We all want to have fun and enjoy ourselves and enjoy our life. And that has to be managed because, yes, we need recreation, we need fun, whatever is the form that a person has. But at the same time, all those natural proclivities can overwhelm the tendency to set goals and to achieve something. So to have a life of becoming includes being able to manage those various kinds of proclivities. And that's a little bit what I want to talk about. So it's one thing to set goals. It's another thing to know how to get there. And that takes this management. When children are young, they don't have that capacity yet. So who's going to be responsible? I'm kind of loading you down with some work, mom and dad, and also teachers, the adults. The adults in the room have to be the one who's responsible to help the child manage themselves so that they can reach their goals. Doesn't mean we're hard-nosed pushing down on them, but we provide the guidance, we provide the understanding, we provide the guardrails that allow children to grow so that over time, eventually what happens is they become competent, responsible, self-determined, and they can make these kind of decisions for themselves, how to manage their tendency toward pleasure, toward enjoyment, all of which are good, their need of other people. All these are things that they need, but to manage them so they don't undermine their own personal becoming, their own goal setting. And to that end, I thought it would be important today that I share with you, because you have this transition so you can see at the very beginning when children are probably under the age of 7 or 6, lot more authority from mom or dad or from parents to structure the pathway for children. And then little by little, through means of conversations and mutual education, you can move toward the child taking their own responsibility for their life and for their week and for their goal setting. It's put this way by Lev Vygotsky. He says that a personal responsibility, the research is consistent. Autonomy is not an achievement, or I should say it is an achievement, and it's not a starting condition. It's something that's achieved. He writes, autonomy emerges. And by the way, Lev Vygotsky was a Russian psychologist writing in the 1930s, poor thought leader in the 20th century in American psychology as well. He writes that autonomy emerges through guided participation, not by being thrown into it prematurely. Similarly, Erik Erikson, you might more recognize that name if you've taken any psychology courses in the United States. He's one of the most influential psychologists of the 20th century, and he writes, the stages of healthy autonomy require the firm holding of caregivers. And without it, if there's not a firm holding, the child experiences not freedom, meaning they make their own choice and they're free to do it and they're happy about it, but rather they've experienced doubt and insecurity because they don't have a framework. They don't have guardrails up. Diana Baumrein is also probably the foundational voice in this matter, and she came up with 3 kinds of parenting styles: authoritarian, authoritative, and permissive. You may have read that at some time in some common literature or heard that from somebody. But her longitudinal data study showed that children of permissive parents, in other words, there's no guardrails, who were given excessive choice and minimal direction, exhibited lower self-regulation over time, higher impulsivity, and less confidence than children whose parents exercise firm but warm authority. And her insight directly contradicts the assumption that maximizing a child's choices, let them choose. When they're young, yeah, they can choose between vanilla ice cream or chocolate ice cream. But so many of the other choices, they have no background experience to make good choices. And then you cast them into doubt and insecurity. But with the guidance of both warmth and firmness and direction that maximizes their development. So the next thing I want to present to you, so you notice, you see there's this continuum, very tight, firm oversight of children, and eventually you want them to be independent, totally autonomous if they can be, although I think lifelong we all need people to step in to help us. This kind of transition is built on a conversation, and it's a conversation on communication, where what we know as adults of setting goals and reaching goals and the self-management that it takes and the cognitive control that it takes, we have to be on the same page with our students, with our children. The parent-child relationship, I want to read you a little bit of research in this, mainly from John Bowlby, the attachment theory. And he writes this: the parent-child relationship is properly understood as an asymmetric, listen closely, dialogic apprenticeship. Okay, big words, let me explain. Asymmetric means because the parent or the teacher holds the knowledge, the formation, and the authority the child does not yet possess. But it's dialogic because the child is from the start a full subject. There's somebody there. You can't just press them into a mold, whose integrity must be honored. Even when they're little, you respect them. You may not let them do the things they want to. You still have the authority, but they're still honored, and they learn that. And then finally, an apprenticeship, because the goal is not assimilation, but eventual co-membership in a shared tradition of practice. So there's this relationship that parents, even of young children, at the beginning, you're very authoritative, so that there's a formation, there's a framework for the child to grow into. But little by little, this kind of asymmetric, dialogic relationship grows. And I would suggest that this kind of relationship, this kind of conversation can go on all through high school, all through the college years and beyond. In fact, if you do it well, it's lifelong. That kind of it just becomes more and more mutual, less and less authoritative. Um, and at any time on this continuum of responsibility, from going where it's all parents, all teachers, to more and more independence, is judged by demonstrated responsibility. Let me explain what that means. Demonstrated responsibility. I'll just give you an example. I think it's a good illustration. Very often, I'll have parents of a fourth grade student, fifth grade student, sixth grade student. They'll say, you know, he's now in the sixth grade and we want to give him full authority. He can, full autonomy. He makes his choices, et cetera, et cetera. And 2 months later, notice he's not turning in any homework. He's not studying for his tests. And so we can go back to the parents and say, we understand you want your son or daughter to have more autonomy, but look what's happening. They're not getting their work done. They're not doing well. They're not studying. So there's no demonstrated responsibility. So mom and dad may have to step in and recreate some framework. So the extent that parents pull their hands off, take their hands off the steering wheel, is to the extent that children are able to demonstrate their responsibility. So you can see then this management, this cognitive control, this executive functioning goes from parents and teachers mainly being the ones constructing the framework to when there's more and more responsibility of the children, but it's based on a conversation. It's based on mutual education where both the parents and the child, they understand, how do I set goals? What do I have to manage? Where do I need help? What kind of environment do I need? It's mutual and it's a conversation. And that is probably the best way science has told us, research has told us, but it's also historical, that you need this kind of mentorship that first creates a framework and then gradually can let the boy or the girl evolve into their own self-development, their own self-confidence in how they live their life and choose to live their life. This is education for becoming. So you can see, though it includes all the typical subjects that we normally take, but especially something's going on underneath to create a sense of responsibility for their life and setting goals and becoming whatever they can become. Thank you.